industrial actions are a way of highlighting the plight of workers, with the greatest outcome being improved working conditions. However, we've seen countless reports of workers either being left worse off than where they started, with some losing their jobs due to strikes, not to forget the mental instability that it has left many, especially in a time where unemployment is at an all-time high in the country. Now, to give us a full analysis, I'm joined via Zoom by Labour researcher Herbert Jauch. A very good evening and welcome to the Daily Roundup, Mr. Jauch.
Good evening and thank you very much.
Mr. Jauch, we have witnessed a great number of strikes in the past couple of years, and this year is no different. What reasons would you attribute the numerous industrial actions that have been taking place nationwide?
Well, there's a combination of factors at play here. One is that in the wake of COVID, which is now already 1.5 years, workers were struggling to get increases then when the COVID pandemic hit Namibia and the world, and the economic consequences were often extremely detrimental. It meant for workers that they had to, we're always told, tighten the belt, be happy that you still have a job, don't expect anything more. The situation is tough, and in many sectors, of course, it was. But at the same time, of course, globally, the super wealthy elite got even richer during that period. At the same time, workers were told not to expect any increases at all. Now, the pandemic then ended earlier this year, and still workers are told to be patient and to wait for what the company is able to offer them. In terms of our labor legislation and the setup, workers need to join trade unions and represent the majority at the workplace for them at all to be able to start the process of collective bargaining. In other words, only then can they negotiate on their own behalf for better conditions of employment. But at the same time, parallel to that, workers have many more unemployed family members to cater for. So the pressure on them is increasing all the time because the wages are not, on the one hand, not kept pace with inflation, and on the other hand, there's an increasing number of family members and friends that rely on the wage earners. So there was enormous pressure on workers building over the last 3-4 years. And the frustration for workers is to say, well, we're always told to be patient, we're always told to wait for better days to come, but we can't make ends meet anymore. And that is the fundamental economic condition that underpins the industrial action that we see now. But the second aspect is also that the envisioned kind of negotiation practices between employers and unions, number one, only cover certain workers, and number two, are often not successful, resulting in disputes and then ultimately in strikes. Sometimes because the process of going on a protected strike is so lengthy and cumbersome, workers lose patience and then take industrial actions earlier, which is then regarded as unprotected or an illegal strike, as some people call it. And that kind of then worsens the situation when workers are still facing disciplinary action and in some cases suspensions or dismissals.
Now, there are a number of fragmented unions that form abruptly. Could you talk to us about what the labor law states when it comes to forming a substantive union? And I mean, can a union, for example, mislead its members, and what rights do workers have in such circumstances? Because we have seen so many incidences, and also perhaps can the workers have legal ground against the union if they see that they have been misled to a point that they lose their jobs?
Well, trade unions have to be worker-led organizations. That is a fundamental difference. It's not like an insurance company or anything else that you join to get a certain benefit. A trade union is a workers' organization that must be led by workers and must be at all times be accountable to them. workers join unions out of their free will. They pay then a membership fee and are then, of course, also expecting certain services from the union. Now, when a union gives bad advice, I mean, union leaders advise their members badly, and then workers go on a certain action that ultimately costs them their job or that leads to a great disadvantage for them, then it becomes very difficult, because the moment workers give a mandate to a union leadership, then that leadership acts on their behalf. And workers must make sure that within the union they have control over their leadership. It's very crucial. You've mentioned examples where seemingly union officials have given bad advice to workers. Workers acted on that advice and then faced sometimes even dismissals. And there it's very difficult to proceed in terms of the labor law, because once a union is recognized, once workers join that union, once that union negotiates on their behalf, then they are also bound by the decisions and even by the mistakes of that union. Taking a union to court as a member, you would have to show that the union is criminally liable, and that's again an expensive and costly experience for workers. So we don't have many recourses in that light. So the recourse for workers must be, number one, workers' control as a principle. Number two, that workers elect officials and leaders who are able to represent them well, but who also understand that union democracy means getting mandates and feedback to members. That is basically the best advice one can give to workers at this point in time. Another aspect that your question touches on is that we have so many different unions in Namibia, that the issue of union unity seems to be a far gone pipe dream almost now, that's not reachable in the foreseeable future. So unions need to also think a bit strategically in what ways can they strengthen each other instead of fighting each other and weakening kind of the workers' movement even further. That kind of process is starting here and there around issues of common interest, like the right to strike, which will affect all workers. But it's an ongoing process, and we'll have to see how far it goes. At this point, bad advice from a union is very costly to their members, and therefore those who are elected into leadership positions must know what responsibility they carry and must be honest and open when dealing with their members and be accountable to them. You cannot just give bad advice and then disappear from the scene and leave your members to deal with the fallout.
Mr. Jauch, due to time and in closing, what are the repercussions if workers go on strike with an unrecognized union and the remedies thereof?
Yes, in terms of the current law and regulations, a protected strike can only be called by a union which represents the majority of workers in that what's called bargaining union or at the workplace. And the union is also then recognized as such by the employer. So the union must represent the majority of employees. If another union that is not representing the majority is calling their members out on strike, this is by labor law regarded as an unprotected strike. And then their members may face disciplinary action. So it sometimes happens. Sometimes members would even say, we take the risk, we're willing to go for it, we need to send a signal. But they need to be informed very clearly about the risks they take and what may happen. And I think this is the responsibility of a union towards their members to be very clear and honest and transparent about what are the implications. A strike is a lengthy process. There are many, many procedural steps that workers need to take before a strike is considered a protected strike.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Jauch, for speaking to us this evening.
You're most welcome.
That's labor researcher Herbert Jauch ending our discussion. Up next is